No more government cost cutting. We've got to have a fair election. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. I'm here with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. And gentlemen, that's actually the latest word from Louis Dejoy, the Postmaster General of the United States, who announced that due to growing pressure from lawmakers and concerns that for some reason the Trump administration was trying to make the Postal Service less functional so that mail-in ballots would be further delayed and therefore cast doubt on the entire election, that he said that he will not go ahead with cost-cutting measures until after the election that could conceivably have an effect. And it's interesting, Stephen Green. Here's what Dejoy said in a statement, the Postmaster General. There are some long-standing operational initiatives, efforts that predate my arrival at the Postal Service, that have been raised as areas of concern as the nation prepares to hold an election in the midst of a devastating pandemic. To avoid even the appearance of any impact on the election mail, I'm suspending these initiatives until after the election is concluded. So, Steve, this guy who's accused because he's a big Trump supporter and was a donor to President Trump's campaign and apparently just a political appointment to Postmaster General, is saying that the things he's canceling in order to not save money weren't even started during his time in the office. What do you make of all this?
Democrats are just evil bastards who will say anything. How about that? Did I think I covered it?
I think you did in broad brushstrokes, but what,
yeah, and I'm not talking about your average rank and file Democratic voter who means well and has been sold a bill of goods all their adult political lives. I'm talking about the DNC and everybody in Washington who are just pure evil. There's no getting around it. They will say and do anything to maintain and increase their political power. The last 3.5 years have been nothing but that nonstop, starting with the Russia hoax. I do want to say a few words, though, about this mail-in voting effort that the Democrats are pushing, largely Democrats, I should say. Voting in person engenders trust, especially the way we used to do it here in Colorado before we moved to an all mail-in balloting system. You would show up at your precinct and they would ask to see your voter or your photo ID, and they would compare that to the voter roll. So they know that I'm me and I know that that's me in the voter roll, and they hand me a ballot that I can see the person handing it to me. And I also know, and this also builds trust, that there are members of both major political party and maybe even a green or a libertarian there working at my precinct, keeping an eye on each other and making sure that nobody is up to any shenanigans. I then take my ballot by myself to a little booth and I fill it out, and then I slip it myself into the machine, and I can see that it has accepted my ballot and hopefully counted my vote. If I do need assistance, that assistance is rendered to me in public where other people can see. Every step of this process engenders trust. And an election that people don't trust the result of, you might as well not have the damn thing. It's actually worse than nothing, at least in the short run. Mail-in balloting has none of that. One of Glenn Reynolds' friends on Instant Pundit today, there's a Facebook thing that he posted called mail-in balloting, not absentee voting, but called this all-mail balloting, essentially junk mail voting. You get a ballot in the mail that's basically addressed to John voter or current resident. They're just sending out hundreds of thousands, or if we go national, hundreds of millions of ballots to God knows where, getting filled out by God knows who, and then getting processed, God knows how, by the post office, whose union has endorsed Joe Biden. So every step of that process destroys trust. So as far as I'm concerned, all of this talk about the post office, all of the push to mail-in balloting, it serves one purpose, and it's not to steal the election. That's a nice side effect, but I think we've seen the Democrats are plenty skilled in stealing close elections. That's not really the goal here. The goal here is to create such distrust in the election process that people become sick of it and they're ready for something else. And that's the end of this.
Steve, let me follow up on that, because actually President Trump has made several comments in recent days that it seems like he is determined to sow mistrust in the election process. And he's basically saying, if the Democrats win, then you know it was corrupt. And this is the president of the United States.
Yeah.
So, ipso facto, if I don't win this election, it couldn't possibly be because the other candidate got more votes. It must be because corruption.
Yeah, everybody knows I'm not always a fan of the president's scattershot approach to attacking his critics. Sometimes it's great. In this case, I think short term, it might be doing him some good. Long term, say the morning of November 5, when we still don't have a winner announced, that could come back and bite him on the ass. And I wish he were a little more subtle, shall we say, about these things on occasion.
So, Bill Whittle, the inspiration really for doing this episode of Right Angle was not what's going on with the Postmaster General or the Trump administration or mail-in balloting or anything like that. It was a public service announcement recently recorded by John Ratzenberger, who played postal carrier Cliff Clavin on the old show Cheers. That was a big show back in our boyhood or young adulthood. And I'll read you a couple of lines from the commercial and then ask you a question. So he's in the character. He's saying the post office is in a little bit of a pickle right now. It is certainly in the news being bounced back and forth. So I had an idea. Why not do all your Christmas shopping early at the post office store? Why not translate the dollar amount you're going to pay for Aunt Tilly's new hat and just buy her that amount of stamps? Easy to carry, easy to mail, easy to ship, and it's worth something, and it'll be worth something for a long time. Bill, it's satire, but it just makes you think, the Postal Service has needed reform for a long, long time. And, the absurd idea that this organization, which has essentially a hard connection to every household in the United States, somehow has failed to parlay that into a sustainable business model that can not only perform its fundamental job, but keep going for the long run without, borrowing money from its own employees' retirement fund to keep operational.
Well, a lot to say there. You can just imagine a kid's delight on Christmas morning when he thinks he's getting his Xbox and opens it up and it's nothing but $300 worth of stamps. Stamps, hooray! Something I can use. John is a great guy. John's a very smart guy, very funny guy, and he's a very brave guy. He was I remember, I'm pretty sure it was I can't remember honestly whether it was the Romney election or the McCain election, but he was out there in front of this. He's like an openly conservative guy and a great guy. And I just have to check this in. What John Ratzenberger did with Cliff Clavin is very unusual. As it turns out, I had a chance to write 4 spec scripts for Cheers. None of them were produced, but I was working with the producers on 3 or 4. And Ratzenberger's portrayal of Cliff Clavin is one of those very few cases where the character is so clear that he actually writes himself for the writer. That you don't have to think about what Cliff might say. You already know what he's going to say. I remember I was thinking, what would Cliff say? And the first thing I came up with was, the Eiffel Tower there, she was never completed due to a shortage of plaster after World War I. and just so all of it. And look, the post office, it's hard to believe that the Postmaster General is a cabinet position, that when Lincoln was trying to figure out how to save the Union, one of the people around the table was the Postmaster General. But those days are long, long gone. I think really to answer the question about the efficacy of it, the efficiency of it is just, it cannot possibly succeed, Scott, because it's one of those god-awful hybrids that are half government and half not. It's like Amtrak. It's like, well, is it government? Yeah, kind of, but it's a business? Yeah, sort of. And, you just can't succeed with a model like that. I will say that this seems to be another example of Donald Trump's pretty uncanny ability to not die on the wrong hill. You know what I mean? He's not the kind of guy who's going to just, if he says, well, we need to reform the post office. You're just trying to do it so that you can, steal the election. Fine. We'll do it after the election. What difference does it make? I don't care. That's may not sound like much, but that's actually a profound skill to have in a world where all of these traps are set by the mainstream media. Narratives are constructed out of the most, as Steve pointed out, the most innocent of motives. And in fact, motives that were set in place by the Obama administration. You're trying to steal the election. Trump has got he didn't argue. It's not like, you think we're stealing it? Fine, we'll do it afterwards. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Not important. That I thought was well handled. And as far as the rest of it goes, I really don't care, honestly. It's not high on my list of things that I lose sleep over about post office reform. They do a job. Sometimes it's a good job. The post office in my neighborhood is very well run, but by and large, it's not a pleasant experience. And if I get stamps for Christmas, somebody's going to pay.
You won't even get a card from me. Don't worry about that. So, this is, I think, I can best describe the difference between voting in person and voting by mail as being like watching a play on TV. You just lose something when you're not in the theater with the people. I think obviously there are reasons to do an absentee ballot. You're overseas, you're serving in our military, you're away at college, or like President Trump, you're away from your home state. He's actually requested an absentee ballot. So any news reports that you hear saying that he's absolutely against mail-in voting, that's not what he's against. He's against what Steve was describing, which is mass mailing ballots to everybody on the list. And having run for office before, I know how bad those lists are, how difficult it is to keep them up to date. And I'm not saying that the county officials who are in charge of that responsibility are not working as hard as they can to keep those up to date, but they're always going to be flawed. And when you mass mail ballots out, you're just asking for trouble and confusion and delay and questions about the outcome. But I think when you just fill out a form when you could be there in person, I think it hurts your conception of the country. I think it damages your view of this great republic. Because when you're just filling out a form, that's just like government in the worst sense of it. Oh, it's another form I've got to fill out. It's like the 1040 form for the IRS. But when you're going someplace with some people, greeted by candidates for local office who are, eagerly trying to petition you for their vote, and you participate in that spectacle, that gathering, that real human activity, that's not just government. That's civics. That's participation. That's a democratic republic where the people are engaged. And we need to be reminded, biannually at least, that there is something to this magical, exceptional country that we're part of. There is something that is maybe not so different as it used to be, since so many other countries have followed in our wake and nobody's quite nailed it the way we have. But there is something peculiar and unique and desirable and worth sustaining in this constitutional republic. And I need to go somewhere and be with those people, and I need to stand up for what this country means. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.